The leather chair in my father's study felt cold, despite the warm summer air drifting through the open windows. My sister Victoria stood behind him, her perfectly manicured hands resting on his shoulders, a triumphant smile playing on her lips. Mom sat quietly in the corner, refusing to meet my eyes. "It's quite simple, Elizabeth," Dad said, sliding the papers across his mahogany desk. "Sign over your inheritance rights to Victoria, and you can keep your current lifestyle. Refuse, and you're cut off. Completely." I looked at the document, a full renunciation of my inheritance rights to both Grandma's estate and the family business, Harrison Enterprises. The ink on Grandma's death certificate was barely dry, and they were already dividing up her empire like vultures. "Why?" I asked quietly. "Why now?" Because Victoria stepped forward, her designer heels clicking on the hardwood floor. "The company needs strong leadership. Someone who understands business. Not some charity-obsessed dreamer who'd give everything away to the first sad story they heard." I almost smiled. They had no idea. "And this has nothing to do with Grandma changing her will last month." Dad's facade cracked slightly. "That's irrelevant. She wasn't in her right mind." "Really?" I pulled out my phone, playing a video I'd recorded just 2 weeks ago. Grandma sat in her garden, lucid and sharp as ever, discussing her plans for the company's future. "Turn that off," Victoria snapped. "Why? Afraid of what else she might have recorded?" Dad's face hardened. "Enough games. Sign the papers, or you're out. No more trust fund, no more apartment, no more safety net. You'll have nothing." I picked up the pen, its weight familiar in my hand. "You're right about one thing," I said, signing my name with a flourish. "After today, everything changes." Victoria snatched the papers, checking my signature. Finally, showing some sense. "Oh, I'm showing something all right." I reached into my bag and pulled out a heavy manila envelope. "Grandma left me something better than an inheritance." "What are you talking about?" Dad's voice held a note of uncertainty. I opened the envelope, the contents of Grandma's safety deposit box, which I'd retrieved this morning. Their smiles vanished when they saw what I spread across the desk. Documents, photographs, USB drives, and a letter written in Grandma's distinctive hand, addressed to the SEC. "What is this?" Victoria whispered. "Evidence," I said calmly, "of every illegal transaction, every falsified report, every embezzled dollar you've stolen from the company over the past 5 years." Dad lunged for the papers, but I was faster, sliding them back into the envelope. "Copies are already with my lawyer," I continued, "and the SEC, and the FBI. Grandma was quite thorough in her documentation." "You're lying." Victoria's voice shook. "Grandma didn't know anything about how you've been stealing from the pension fund, or about Dad's offshore accounts, or maybe about your little side deal with our competitors." Mom finally spoke from her corner. "Robert? What is she talking about?" "Nothing," Dad said quickly. "Elizabeth is just trying to cause trouble." I pulled out my tablet, pulling up the encrypted files Grandma had collected. These records show otherwise. Bank transfers, forged signatures, falsified board minutes. Grandma spent the last year of her life gathering evidence against you both. "Why would she do that?" Victoria demanded. "Because she knew what you really were. She watched you strip the company bare, steal from loyal employees, destroy everything our family built." Dad's face had gone pale. "The board will never believe." "The board meeting is in an hour," I cut him off. Would you like to know what else is in this envelope? Like how you've been paying them off to ignore the fraud. Victoria's perfect composure cracked. You can't prove any of this. I stood slowly, gathering my things. Actually, I can. Grandma made sure of that. She knew you'd try to force me out eventually. That's why she spent months teaching me everything about the company, showing me where to look, what to document. We're your family. Dad tried one last time. Family? I laughed softly. Family doesn't steal from each other. Family doesn't destroy lives for profit. Grandma was family. She taught me what that really means. My phone buzzed. A text from my lawyer. SEC agents in position. Board members arriving early. You have 30 minutes, I told them. Either resign voluntarily and return everything you stole or face criminal charges. You'd send your own father to prison? Dad's voice cracked. You were willing to leave me with nothing, I reminded him. Actions have consequences. Victoria grabbed my arm as I turned to leave. Wait, there must be something we can. Actually, I pulled free. There is something else you should know. I paused at the door. I never needed your trust fund. Everything I have, I earned. The charity work you mocked? It was a cover for my real job, forensic accounting. Grandma hired me 2 years ago to investigate you both. The silence in the room was deafening. 30 minutes, I reminded them. Tick-tock. As I walked out, I heard Victoria's heels clicking frantically across the floor, probably rushing to her office to start deleting files. But it was too late. Everything was already documented, copied, secured. My phone buzzed again. An email from Grandma's lawyer, scheduled to be delivered today. My dearest Elizabeth, if you're reading this, you've finally shown them who you really are. Remember what I taught you. True strength isn't in what you have, but in how you use it. Make them understand what it means to betray family. All my love, Grandma. I smiled, heading toward the boardroom where the real showdown would begin. Because this wasn't just about inheritance or money. This was about justice, truth, and showing everyone exactly why you should never underestimate the quiet one who watches and waits. And I was just getting started. The boardroom of Harrison Enterprises looked different from the head of the table. 14 board members sat nervously around the massive oak surface, their usual arrogance replaced by poorly concealed fear. The evidence files from Grandma's safety deposit box lay before me, an arsenal ready to be deployed. Victoria burst in, her designer outfit slightly disheveled, followed by Dad, who looked like he'd aged a decade in the past 30 minutes. Mom slipped in quietly behind them, taking a seat near the door. Before we begin, I said calmly, I should introduce our guests. I gestured to the 2 serious-looking individuals by the window. Agent Phillips and Agent Torres from the SEC. They're very interested in our company's recent financial activities. This is ridiculous, Victoria started. You can't just. Actually, I can. I opened the first file. Let's start with the pension fund. Specifically, how $47 million disappeared into various shell companies owned by the Sterling family. That's you, Victoria. She went pale. Those were legitimate business transactions. Really? I pulled up a document on the screen behind me, because according to these transfer records, the money went directly into your personal accounts in the Cayman Islands. One of the board members, George Wilson, cleared his throat. Miss Harrison, surely we can discuss this privately. Like you discussed the kickbacks, Mr. Wilson. I turned to the next page. Grandma was particularly interested in the consulting fees paid to your children's companies. companies that don't actually exist. The room went deadly quiet. Elizabeth, Dad tried, his voice attempting authority but failing. You're making a mistake. Think about what you're doing to this family. Family. I stood slowly. Let's talk about family, Dad. Let's talk about how you and Victoria have been selling company secrets to our competitors. How you've been stealing from employees who've worked here for decades. How you plan to strip this company bare and leave nothing but empty shells and broken promises. I pressed a button on my laptop. The screen filled with surveillance footage. Dad and Victoria in secret meetings, handling documents, making transfers. Grandma saw everything. I continued. She watched you betray everything she built. But instead of confronting you directly, she decided to teach you a lesson about consequences. By destroying her own company, Victoria sneered, but her voice shook. No, by saving it from you. I pulled out another document, Grandma's last amendment to her will, properly notarized and witnessed. 3 months ago, Grandma transferred controlling interest in Harrison Enterprises to a blind trust. Care to guess who the trustee is? Dad's face went ashen. No. Yes. Everything you thought you were inheriting? It's been under my control since before she died. That inheritance you just made me sign away. Worthless papers. Victoria lunged across the table, reaching for the will, but Agent Phillips stepped forward quickly. Miss Sterling, please remain seated. I continued as if nothing had happened. Every board member involved in the fraud has 2 choices: resign immediately and cooperate with the investigation, or face criminal charges. And before you think about destroying evidence, I smiled slightly, everything has already been documented and secured. One by one, board members began standing, heading for the door. Only 3 remained seated, the ones Grandma had identified as honest. Elizabeth. Mom spoke for the first time, her voice small. What happens now? Now. I opened my briefcase and pulled out a stack of papers. Victoria and Dad will sign these confession statements and resignation letters. They'll return every penny they stole. They'll cooperate fully with the federal investigation. And if we refuse, Dad challenged. I played my final card, pulling up emails showing their plans to frame the company's longtime CFO for their crimes. Then Martin Lewis's family gets to learn how you planned to destroy his life to save yourselves. I'm sure his daughter, you remember Sarah, right, Dad? Your goddaughter? Would be very interested in these conversations. Victoria slumped in her chair. You really are grandmother's hair. No, I corrected her. I'm her justice. As they signed the papers with trembling hands, my phone buzzed with an alert. The company's stock had been temporarily suspended from trading. Standard procedure when fraud is discovered. One more thing, I said as they stood to leave. The apartment you're living in, Victoria? The one you thought Grandma gave you? Check the deed. She froze. What about it? It belongs to the employee pension fund now. Consider it the first repayment of what you stole. You have 48 hours to vacate. Where am I supposed to go? She asked, her voice small for the first time I could remember. Perhaps you should have thought about that before you stole from people who lived paycheck to paycheck. After they left, Mom stayed behind. Did you know? All along. I suspected, I admitted, but Grandma confirmed it. She wanted to see if they would change on their own, make better choices. When they didn't, she chose you to deliver justice, Mom finished. Not just justice, I said, touching Grandma's old nameplate on the desk. Redemption. For the company, for the employees, for our family's name. My phone buzzed again. A message from Grandma's old assistant. The safe in her house. Did you find what she left there? I smiled, thinking of the other safety deposit box I hadn't opened yet. The one containing the real secrets that would shake our industry to its core. Because this wasn't just about Harrison Enterprises anymore. This was about exposing a network of corruption that reached far beyond our family. And Grandma had left me everything I needed to finish what she started. The key to Grandma's second safety deposit box felt heavy in my hand as I stood in the bank's private viewing room. It had been a week since the boardroom showdown, and the dust was finally starting to settle. Victoria had moved out of the apartment. Dad had checked himself into a stress management facility, and Mom was slowly coming to terms with the new reality. But Grandma's last message suggested there was more to come. The second box contains the real war chest. Here, use it wisely. With trembling fingers, I inserted the key. Inside lay a single red leather notebook and a USB drive marked insurance. My phone buzzed. A text from Agent Phillips. They're making moves. Victoria was seen meeting with Harrison Global's CEO. Of course, they wouldn't go down without a fight. Back in my office, Grandma's old office, I opened the notebook. Her elegant handwriting filled every page, detailing a conspiracy that made our family's fraud look like pocket change. My dearest Elizabeth, the first page read, "What you are about to learn will test everything you believe about our industry. Harrison Global, Sterling Industries, Wellington Corp. They're all connected. The fraud goes back decades. Your father and sister weren't just stealing from our company. They were part of a larger network. One that's destroyed countless lives, ruined families, and corrupted everything it touched." I plugged in a USB drive. Thousands of files appeared. Emails, bank records, photographs, and recorded conversations. Names of respected business leaders jumped out, along with politicians, judges, and regulatory officials. My hands shook as I read through the evidence. This wasn't just corporate fraud. It was systematic corruption on an unimaginable scale. Another text from Agent Phillips. Victoria just left Harrison Global. She looked happy. Should we be worried? Before I could respond, my office door burst open. Victoria strode in, looking triumphant in a new designer suit. Well, well, she smirked. Enjoying Grandma's old office? Better pack up. The board's calling an emergency meeting in an hour. I leaned back in my chair. Let me guess. Harrison Global is launching a hostile takeover? Her smile faltered slightly. You can't stop it. We have the votes, the backing, everything we need. Interesting timing, I said, opening Grandma's notebook. Did you tell your new friends about the evidence Grandma collected on them too? What are you talking about? I turned my laptop around, showing her the files. Her face went from smug to ashen as she recognized names, dates, transactions. That's impossible. No, I said quietly. That's Grandma's real legacy. She spent years documenting everything. Every corrupt deal, every bribed official, every destroyed life. And now it's all mine. You're bluffing. But her voice shook. I pressed a button on my phone. Agent Phillips, please come in. The SEC agent entered, followed by 2 FBI agents and a federal prosecutor. Perfect timing, I said. Victoria was just about to tell us about her meeting with Harrison Global, specifically about their plan to use stolen pension funds to finance the takeover. Victoria sank into a chair. You don't understand. They'll kill me if I talk. Actually, we understand perfectly. I opened another file. Grandma documented the threats too. That's why she set up witness protection arrangements for anyone willing to testify. The federal prosecutor stepped forward. Miss Sterling, we're prepared to offer you a deal. Full immunity in exchange for your testimony against Harrison Global and the others. Victoria looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in years. Why are you offering this? After everything I did? Because Grandma believed in redemption. I said softly, even for those who lost their way. She buried her face in her hands. I'll need protection. For me and Dad. Already arranged, Agent Phillips confirmed. As Victoria left with the agents, my phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. Miss Harrison? A gruff voice said. This is Senator Matthews. We need to talk about your grandmother's files. Actually, Senator, I smiled grimly. We need to talk about your offshore accounts and those interesting votes on banking regulations. The next few weeks were a blur of federal investigations, witness statements, and media frenzy. Harrison Global's CEO was arrested trying to flee the country. Sterling Industries filed for bankruptcy. Wellington Corp's board resigned en masse. Through it all, I kept finding more of Grandma's breadcrumbs, carefully laid clues leading to deeper corruption, bigger names, darker secrets. Mom found me late one night, still working through the files. Your grandmother knew, she said quietly. She knew they'd try to push you out, that Victoria and your father would betray her trust. That's why she chose you. She chose me because I was quiet, I corrected, because I watched and learned while they were busy showing off and taking credit. No. Mom touched Grandma's old notebook. She chose you because you have her heart and her steel. The company's annual meeting was scheduled for the next day. Employees, shareholders, and media would all be watching to see what would rise from the ashes of the scandal. I spent the night in Grandma's old office, reading her final letter one more time. Elizabeth, my quiet warrior, by now you've unveiled the truth. The corruption runs deep, but your roots run deeper. Remember, real power isn't in what you destroy, but in what you build from the ruins. I've given you the weapons to tear down the old corrupt system. Now show them how to build something better. All my love, Grandma. The next morning, I stood before a packed auditorium. Familiar faces looked back. Employees who'd almost lost everything. Board members who'd stayed honest. Even Victoria and Dad, out on bail and looking subdued in the back row. Harrison Enterprises was built on a simple idea, I began. That business could be both profitable and ethical. That success didn't require corruption. My grandmother believed this. She spent her final years gathering evidence not just to expose corruption, but to prove that another way was possible. I unveiled our new company structure, employee ownership, transparent accounting, ethical investment standards. We're not just changing policies, I continued. We're changing the game. The old system of corruption and greed is over. Today, we start building something new, something worthy of my grandmother's legacy. The applause was deafening. Later, alone in Grandma's office, I opened her notebook to the last page, finding words I hadn't noticed before. PPS. Check behind the painting of the garden. Some secrets need to be kept for the right moment. I smiled, touching the familiar canvas. There would be time for more revelations later. For now, I had a legacy to rebuild, a family to heal, and a grandmother's final lesson to honor. That sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one you should have watched all along. because they're the ones who see everything, remember everything, and when the time is right, change everything.